Welcome to Bridging the Gap, the preparedness podcast that unites leaders from agencies, academia, and emergency response from around the world. We dive headfirst into the latest threats and hazards, sparking dynamic discussions with experts. Each episode is a thrilling journey to bridge the gap in knowledge and training, helping us all align and tackle crises head-on. Get ready to bridge the gap.
Steve, it's great to be sitting with you here at the National Homeland Security Conference 2025, Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. Thank you for sitting down and having a conversation with me.
Hey, happy to be here.
I'm Mark Amann. I'm the Chief Products Officer at Summit. I'm new here, and I'm new to Bridging the Gap in the podcast. I think we've been on one before, but I get the privilege of talking to you today because of my background as a practitioner was in strategic communications, but we're going to talk about how that's not exactly the same thing as radiological communications. And I'm really, really excited to learn a bit from you about this. Can you tell me just a little bit, give me a 30-second overview of your background and your expertise?
Yeah, so I've been doing health physics work for 7 years now, quite a while. The first 12 years or so, I worked in a pretty heavy industry, dealt with some dose rates that could be, lethal if not handled properly, lots of contamination levels. Left there, spent 18 years working for a DOE response asset tasked with the medical management of radiation accidents. During that 18 years, I had a lot of real-world emergency response, got to talk to a lot of people, teaching, and I've been with Summit now for 8 years as Vice President and Corporate Health Physicist.
I mean, this is amazing because some of my background, just so we understand each other, right? I started with FEMA as a strategic communicator, and then I went to Argonne National Labs, so I was communicating literal risk. This is emergency risk communications around chemical incidents, radiological incidents. But we were talking today, I'll tell everybody listening, we pre-gamed this a little bit. I already learned things I didn't know, and I've been doing this for 27 years. So I am really eager to talk about what makes radiological communications specifically so unique and important. Tell me why it's different from the rest of what we do as PIOs or PAOs in the world.
Well, I think a lot of it comes from just what people think about radiation to begin with, right? We're raised from the time we were kids, the Hulk, Spider-Man, mushroom clouds, all these things, and it's been imprinted upon us. And, it's created this mystique of radiation. It can cause mutations. It's, cancer connotations that go along with it, all these mutations, all these different things that happen. And since we were raised in that environment, and all of a sudden we become adults and somebody says, trust me, that's not the way it works. It's just very difficult to overcome that pre-programming. And we have to understand that our audience is going into the topic with a misperception.
Right.
No perception, but a misperception.
We know what happens to people when they're scared, right? Like from all the research into strategic communications, when you're scared, the average person, maybe college educated, maybe not, drops down to a third, fourth, fifth grade level. So explain to me how we communicate to an 8, 9, 10-year-old the risk associated with radiological exposure.
I'll be honest with you. I think sometimes talking to the 8, 9, 10-year-old is easier than talking to an adult that is under stress.
Really?
Well, their mind's open, right? They're listening to you. They don't have a lot of those, perceptions, that are pre-programmed in. Whereas an adult, you've got to overcome that. And so I think the first thing that we have to do, and as science-based people, it's sometimes hard to do. We look at the facts, right? And with radiation, we have to understand that people are afraid. Right or wrong, they are. Right. And so to me, compassion and empathy is the first thing we have to do. Understand why you're afraid of this. It can be a scary thing. Let's talk about that. And then once we do that, then we've opened the mind up to start talking about facts. And as science-based people, we tend to, I think, start at step 2 as opposed to step 1. That step 1 is the understanding and empathy. I from my perspective.
100%. I mean, I'm the communicator in a family of medical people, and bedside manner is extraordinarily important.
Yeah, it's not just for physicians.
And it's not just for physicians, right? It's for health physicists. It's for those of us who communicate risk for a living to people who are scared. Emotions change everything.
For sure. And we tend to use words, that work in our profession. As I always make the joke, if I go to the emergency room and the physician tells me I have an acute case of rhinitis, oh my God, how long do I have to live, doc? Oh, don't worry about it. It's runny nose. Then say runny nose. And with radiation people, health physics and other radiation protection scientists, they tend to use $3 words to say 30 cents worth of information. And that's just not the way that it needs to be. We sound really, really smart when we do it, but nobody knows what we just said. And isn't the purpose of communicating for people to understand what you just said?
I just went through this to share a personal story. Someone very close to me has a cancer diagnosis, and she's a layperson. She has no medical training. I was a fire paramedic. I understand a lot, and I grew up in a medical family. And she got some news that she interpreted as very good. And then she sent me the text from the Cleveland clinic that she got. And I don't want to be the one to explain to her this is not good because it uses clinical, technical words. I'm thinking like in this individual situation, she needs a case manager to explain to her exactly in words she can understand what is happening and what the prognosis is. And that's essentially what we're trying to do, except we're doing it on a population level.
Yeah, it's difficult, right? When you're talking about strategic communications, and we talk this, it's this big macro level for lack of a better term. But I think you can take some of the principles of speaking to individuals or small groups and apply it. So like I said, I've been doing teaching and training from radiation worker training at a facility where there may be PhDs in the same room with people who can't read and write. So you've got to reach all of these audiences, right? And so I'm not going to lie, I said a lot of dumb things up front that didn't work, right? But we learn from it and we get better. And a lot of what I do now is I'll try to get a message and I may go to my neighbor or my daughter or something and say, okay, here's what I'm saying. Now tell me what I just said in your words, not my words. And if they can repeat it back in a way that's 85, 90%, I mean, that's great, right? They're getting the concepts and they're understanding and they're starting to be able to get their hands around it. And I think that's the key for radiation communications. And like I said, we're already starting at a deficit because people have preconceptions that we have to overcome.
Has this changed over the last, let's say, 10, 15 years? What are the challenges that are new to you as a health physicist who also specializes in communication? And you're clearly like one of the best communicators I've ever sat down with. But like, what has changed as we've been more engaged as a society in tribalism? Different, you get your truth, I get mine. How has your job become different or more difficult?
I'll be honest with you. So I've been doing health physics work like 35 plus years. I'm a certified health physicist. I'm a fellow of the Health Physics Society, kind of been there and done that. But the biggest challenge I've had in my career has never been the health physics part. It's always been the communication part. Whether that's talking to a law enforcement officer saying, it's okay to move forward. Don't concentrate so much on radiation that you forget about the bad guy with a gun. Or the emergency responder having to go to a contaminated environment to rescue somebody, which I had to deal with. All these different things. Really, really hard. And so the challenge has always been communication. And in today's environment, there's so much information available to people out there, be it on the internet or whatever the case may be. Now, how do you parse the good information from the bad information and rechannel people and do it in an understandable manner? Because ultimately, that's key.
Right, because it's the population in general, but it's also, I appreciate what you said about providing direction to first responders, to the people on the ground. As a former firefighter, I was taught that radiation's really scary, but I know now a little bit more than I knew then, and there is a safe level of exposure to radiation.
Yeah, well,
safe dosage, safe time. How do we communicate that to first responders so they can do the job that we need them to do?
Well,
without being freaked out that they're, going to turn into Spider-Man.
I can tell you how I did it in person, which does not translate to populations, but in person, I said, it's going to be okay. I'll go with you. I went in and I took the same risk and I didn't put on any protective clothing. I just said, I'll go with you. I'll take the same risk that I'm telling you is okay.
I really appreciate what that means.
I think that when we're talking to populations, as radiation protection professionals, we have to go with you. Put it in terms that people can understand. And it may be something as simple, well, if it were my daughter, I would say to do this, or I did. We don't have to make it complicated. In my opinion, empathy is the most important thing that we can have because it opens up the receiver to any message that you're going to give. So we have to start there, and we just don't do a good job of that I could be wrong, but from a scientific community, I just don't think we do a good job on the empathetic front. We do a great job of spitting out facts, but we don't open up the receiver's ears, receiving them, and then we don't provide them in an understandable way. That, to me, is the key.
I mean, I think you're extraordinarily good at the empathy piece, but I understand I've worked with many scientists. I come from a scientific family who struggle with that. Where we as strategic communicators might be able to really lead and help is with that empathy piece, because we teach that all the time. It's the first thing I lead with, right? When you're making a statement following an incident, you need your chief executive, chief of the department, the mayor, the county commissioner, whoever it is, to lead with empathy. Our hearts are with the people who are suffering from this thing.
Yeah, we're part of it.
And because of that, and we're part of it, we're part of this community, and we're scared too. I think those are valuable messages that communicators can help the scientists with in developing messages that really, really are understanding where the people we serve are.
So
Meet people where they are. That's servant leadership, right?
Yeah,
Like meet them where they are.
Yeah, and it's a two-way street, right? Like you said, the strategic communicators help the scientists. The scientists need to help the strategic communicators as well, right? So integration of some radiation expertise into the message development delivery process before it hits the fan, not after it hits the fan, right? Before it hits the fan, but integrating that into the process is important. And so you as a strategic communicator, me as a subject matter expert, I don't know your job any more than you know my job. But we've got to work together for you to say, here's the help I need. I say, here's what I can bring, but here's what help I need in order to help you. And it's the integration, right? It's not just wait until it hits the fan and say, hey, Steve, you can spell the word radiation, show up and help me.
And that's perfect. So walk me through the different phases. How do I, let's say you're Steve Sugarman, the health physicist. I'm Mark Amann, the PIO, public affairs officer for an organization. How do we do this? How do you suggest that we prepare for an incident and then respond and then recover? Walk me through those stages.
Well, I think, from a communication standpoint, it all starts up front. I need to make myself available and known to you, right? You need to reach out and make that effort to find somebody. I think a lot of times people make the mistake, and you see it on TV and, read it in the papers all the time. The subject matter expert has 17 letters after their name, and they're the smartest person in the room. It doesn't mean people understand what they say. And so where it has to start is the communicator and the subject matter expert have to start to get on the same page. Hey, Mark, I see a lot of things where people talk about clouds of radiation. No such thing as a cloud of radiation. These are materials that are emitted from, the stack or whatever the case may be. And like any other materials, they tend to fall back down to the ground.
These are mistakes that I want to be very clear about that those of us who are laypersons can make because we're perpetuating everything that has come before. Like you said, like we're a cloud of radiation.
Yeah.
I know that radiation doesn't form and move like that, but how do we prevent ourselves from making those mistakes?
It's a conscious effort, right? It's a big elephant. You can only eat it one bite at a time.
Right.
So we have to concentrate and control the things that we can control. We have to have the self-discipline to recognize to do this. And it sounds kind of crazy. It's like, well, Steve, why would you say radioactive materials instead of cloud of radiation? Because I think people see materials, they go, and again, baby powder, what happens? It goes up in the air and sooner or later it comes back down. Radioactive materials are no different. They have some radioactive atoms with it, but it's the same thing. And so if we can put those middle images, right, people think things that people can wrap their hands on, they can touch, see, feel, and conceptualize, it makes every other message that we do more easily digested and understood. And quite frankly, in an emergency response, people look at the boots on the ground and everything else. From my perspective, you're hard-pressed to find something more important in an emergency response than good communication because it drives everything else. That responder's family is at home worrying about that responder. That responder is worried about what's going on. The community is much bigger than just the public or the responders or the communicators or the experts or the people working at whatever. It's huge. Everybody has to be sort of interconnected in that message, I think.
It really is all of us. And that's, a lot of what's behind whole community planning. We need to engage other partners to help provide third-party validation of messages. Who do you recommend that local communicators work with in order to bring in and say, like, this is what we're saying as your public safety agency, but we also have these people standing behind us. Imagine a press conference. Who do I engage to help establish trust?
I think that those are the standard strategic communication goals. I mean, people talk about medical professionals are trusted, clergy, could be trusted people, the fire chief. It depends. And I guess it depends on who you're talking to. You're probably more of an expert of that than I am. But the key to it is to prepare those people and to have that subject matter expert. I don't want to ask you to go up in front of the microphone and then say, hey, Mark, when you get a question, point to me. What I'm going to say is, hey, Mark, here's some questions I would anticipate you being asked. Let's figure out how to answer those in such a way that are technically correct enough, yet understandable, so that you can use the tools that you have and already know how to use. I just want to try to help guide the message so that it's good enough. And I know when I say good enough, that's got a negative connotation to it, but I really think with radiological communications, you can be 100% correct and nobody understands what you just said. Or you can be 90% correct and people understand.
Or
they don't understand.
Or they don't trust you.
Well, big words, we know big words foment distrust.
And
right?
right. And this is one of the things that I concentrate on in my personal interest in research is living in a post-truth society. How do we communicate fact and establish trust with people? Like I'm the type of person that when Steve Sugarman tells me this is the safe dose, this is a safe time of exposure, I'm going to believe you because you know way more about it than I do. And I'm going to trust you. However, I think the general public now is not positioned to just accept the expertise of experts in the public sector, especially.
Well, I don't know, the last X number of years, we've had the internet, Google. Our ability to access information has increased exponentially. You just tremendous ability to access information. The ability to interpret that information, I think, is still linear. And so there are a lot of so-called experts out there that may, go back and forth. But I really think that if somebody can legitimize themselves as an expert or be accepted as one, people will accept it. It's just hearing so many contrary things from quote unquote experts.
This too, because I think that credibility and trust are established by the facts, of course, comprehensive knowledge of the facts. Yes, but there's an emotional component to that
I was
too.
going to say the empathy is really important. I'm affected by this too. My family lives here. My house is downwind from this event, whatever it may be. Again, in my case, radiological is my area of expertise, right? My house is downwind from this. My family lives here. I'm drinking water from this reservoir.
Yeah, this is what I would do if I were in the affected area.
I understand it's scary. It is scary. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, one of my favorite things, one of my favorite gifts I got from my brother, who is an orthopedic surgeon, is a coffee mug that says, "Please don't confuse your Google search for my medical degree."
Yeah.
And that's what we're combating a lot of the time. I mean, every day, I think in public safety, in medicine, in health communications, radiological communications.
It's difficult. And
it's so hard.
Again, you go past this pre-programming. I've done health physics work for a long time. I sit down, in a neighborhood, bar and have a beer with somebody and, hey, I do radiation work. And do you glow? Oh, radioactive materials don't glow, right? But again,
have people actually asked you that question?
Yeah, seriously.
They assume that as a health physicist, you work hanging around cesium.
Yeah, you work around radioactive materials all the time, and therefore you glow. And even if it's a joke, even if it's not real, the joke means the perception is there, right?
There's always that kernel of truth or anxiety or fear in the joke, right? We use jokes as a way to manage our anxiety.
If it wasn't in their mind, the joke wouldn't come out, right? So again, that's the biggest hurdle I think we've got. We've got to step past that. And when we do, the communication, aspects of things, the communicators can have such a huge impact on emergency response because the police move forward and do what they need to do without fear of radiation. And that secondary device that may be there, the guy with with a gun that they've forgotten about because they're worried about radiation, now is not, they're concentrating on the right threat. That firefighter, can go in and do this. That EMS, practitioner can now provide medical care to that patient prior to radiological decon because, you don't get any points for a clean corpse, right? So you have somebody alive because the emphasis was put on the right thing. And that's all communications.
Yeah. And you know what I really appreciate about your perspective in this conversation, Steve, is that a lot of my work has always been focused on the public, on the general public at large. And one of our principal cohort of stakeholders in this situation are police officers, firefighters, EMS, local EMA staff that might be sent into the zone. They need to be prepared with real facts themselves because they don't have the level of education that you have and the exposure to 30-something years of health physics.
And I don't want to be, cavalier about it. I mean, radioactive materials, can they pose a hazard? Yes, they can, but they don't necessarily pose the hazard. It is a hazard to be considered, right, and monitored. And thankfully, radiation is very easy to detect. I mean, biological, chemical, radiological agents, give me radiation any day because I can hold a fairly inexpensive meter, and if it beeps, I can see it. And if you can see something, you can control it and you can protect yourself from it. And that's a key. Radiation is actually easy because it's so easy to detect. Now the trick becomes well, the meter's making this much noise. Is this a problem, yes or no? It's training and education.
I
and communication.
Very much appreciate that point. I'm working chemical programs and BioMD programs right now, and we're not thinking about it that way. Frankly, I'm going to tell you the truth. We're not thinking about that. Radiation is easier than a biological agent that you cannot detect.
Now, I've never been to the doctor and they pull out a meter and rub it over a wound in mine and say, oh, there's bacteria there.
Right.
I can do that with radioactive
You can
materials.
culture it,
right?
but you can't do that with a Geiger counter.
And pull a Geiger counter out, cheap, easy to use, and I say, yep, it's there, it's not.
So, Steve, we're going to bring this home in just a second.
Yep.
Tell me the one thing that you're most, talk about your fear. What are you most fearful of and concerned about, and how do we mitigate and ameliorate that?
I was going to make a joke and say heights is the one I'm most afraid of. I guess if you were talking about, the CBRN realm, it's probably the biological. And it's probably because I am a victim.
Your expertise is in radiation and health physics, but your biggest concern
is biological.
This is a massive takeaway for everybody.
Yeah.
Like, my radiological expert is more concerned about a biological agent.
I am. Now, your family, you said a medical family. My grandfather was a physician too. He would probably give a different answer.
No, but I really appreciate that perspective because I listen to experts like you. And so I really appreciate that. Steve Sugarman, thank you, health physicist for here at SummitET, for joining us at the National Homeland Security Conference, Washington, D.C. 2025. Really appreciate your time and your perspective. I really mean it. In preparing for this with you today and then talking with you, I've learned a lot.
Well, thank you.
And I really appreciate the opportunity that I get to work with you.
Yeah, so. I appreciate it. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Now, thank you, everybody, for joining us for this episode of Bridging the Gap. Steve Sugarman, health physicist.